Hey there, come on in and sit down. Make yourself completely comfortable. Grab a warm cup of tea or a nice soothing oat milk latte, and let us just talk for a little while. Honestly, as I was sitting by my window today watching the gentle rain fall on the leaves outside, I found myself thinking deeply about just how much noise and chaotic energy there is out there in the financial world. Right now, it feels like every single time we open our phones or glance at a screen, there is a new headline shouting about all-time highs and roaring stock markets. But if you are feeling a little bit of a quiet disconnect lately, if you are looking at your own bank accounts and wondering why your personal life does not feel quite as glorious or as easy as the news makes it sound, I really want you to take a slow, deep breath, let that tension go from your shoulders. Because your feelings are completely valid and you are absolutely not alone. Actually, what we are going to explore together today might just be the single baddest hidden oversight in almost everyone's investment plan. And it is something that almost nobody talks about in a gentle way. Imagine for a moment that you own two little shops down on the main street of your neighborhood. One is an incredibly popular little bakery that is bustling every single morning, up over 500% because their fresh sourdough is just beautiful, and everyone loves being there. And the other shop is a little clothing store that people just are not visiting as much anymore, down over 50%, where the lights are dimming and the shelves are gathering dust. If you own those two businesses directly, you would probably be paying very close attention to what was slipping away in that second shop. But when we buy a standard traditional index fund, whether it is in our personal investing accounts or tucked away in our workplace retirement plans, we are neatly bundling them both together into one giant basket. We see one smooth average number on our computer screens every month, and we naturally think everything is perfectly fine. But underneath that quiet surface, the great companies are working overtime to pull us up, while the struggling ones are dragging us down as hard as they possibly can. It is a bit like trying to take a peaceful walk forward on a beautiful afternoon, while someone is quietly stepping on your shoelaces every few yards. And that can feel incredibly exhausting when you are just trying your best to build a safe, secure future for yourself and the people you love. We are told by the big textbooks to just buy and hold forever, to set it and forget it. And that advice sounds so incredibly comforting because it promises us a completely hands-off path to safety. But the truth is, the world is moving and changing faster than it ever has in human history, and that old rigid strategy might be asking you to carry a lot of heavy, unnecessary weight. This is not about predicting market crashes or throwing our hands up in panic, because a real crash means absolutely everything goes down together, like a sudden summer thunderstorm that drenches the whole town. What we are seeing right now is more like a gentle but massive rotation, a deep shifting of the underlying tides. Think of the stock market as a giant swimming pool with several different sections. The total amount of water in the pool stays pretty much the same, which is exactly why the main index looks so steady and high to the casual observer. But if you walk up to the edge and look closely, you will see that one end of the pool is getting incredibly deep and overflowing, while the other end is slowly and quietly draining out into the dry ground beneath. Right now, if we look past the loud front page headlines, more individual industries are actually sliding downhill than are climbing up. Money is quietly packing its bags and moving out of certain older sectors, and it is flooding into very specific real-world spaces. For instance, energy and physical materials are seeing an immense amount of support because, let us face it, we are all feeling the very real pinch of rising prices in our daily lives. When gas and electricity and everyday essentials cost more, it acts like a silent tax on our hard work. Our paychecks might go up by a little bit over time, but if the actual cost of living climbs faster, it always feels like we are running on a treadmill that someone set just a bit too quick. Because of that, the companies that make everyday consumer items, the ones that completely rely on people having lots of extra cash to spend on a whim, are starting to feel a distinct chill. On the other side of the coin, the money is flowing directly toward the heavy lifters of the physical world. The things you can actually touch and see and feel. Think about gold, which people have turned to for thousands of years just to keep their savings safe and preserved when paper currencies lose their grip. Think about the massive energy providers or the raw materials like copper that are absolutely essential for building the modern world, from electrical grids to the massive infrastructure powering our technological landscape. Even industries like uranium are quietly gaining steady ground because our global community needs an immense amount of physical power to keep running, and that power has to come from somewhere real. There are quiet, steady companies out there physically building the roads, pipelines, the water systems, and the data centers that keep our modern life moving forward. They do not go viral on social media, they do not make for flashy dinner party conversation, and they certainly do not feel like volatile games or speculative bets. They are just honest, hard-working businesses with real contracts and real earnings. But because they do not have famous household names, most everyday investors miss them entirely. Meanwhile, the traditional index fund forces you to keep holding onto the shifting ground of the past, like older retail names or giant consulting firms that are being left behind as technology changes how we collaborate and work. It can feel incredibly frustrating to realize that the financial industry often sells us a simplified story, encouraging us to sit perfectly still for decades. While the big institutions move their money around constantly to stay ahead of the curve, they tell us it is diversified, but sometimes that word is just a polite way of saying you are matching your beautiful rocket ships with sinking ships. You do not have to be a high-powered expert with decades of banking experience to see these simple patterns. You just have to look at where the actual resources are flowing. It is about learning to do a little bit of gentle pruning in our lives, removing the things that no longer serve our long-term peace of mind and leaning into the spaces where the world is clearly heading. Our parents and grandparents could often pick one big company name or buy a single broad basket and leave it alone for 30 years because the pace of global change was much slower back then. But today, innovation is disrupting old businesses almost overnight, and holding on to absolutely everything indiscriminately can mean watching your hard-earned savings go sideways for years while the rest of the world moves forward. You deserve to know how the game is played behind the scenes so you can make gentle choices that bring you closer to that feeling of true financial security and freedom, rather than just accepting whatever the broader average market decides to give you. It is about giving yourself the simple tools to protect your wealth, to ensure that your money is working just as hard for you as you did to earn it in the first place. When you realize that you have the power to step away from the crowd and look at the market with calm, clear eyes, everything changes. You no longer feel that sudden jolt of anxiety when the news anchor looks worried. Because you know exactly what is happening beneath the surface, you begin to see investing not as a stressful gamble, but as a slow, deliberate way of taking care of your future self. Like planting a small garden in your backyard and making sure the soil is rich and the weeds are gently pulled out. We do not need to complicate this with thousands of strange technical terms or overwhelming charts that make our heads spin after a long day at work. We just need to use our everyday common sense. I was actually watching a quiet little video conversation between two popular financial creators recently, and they were going back and forth about different money beliefs. At one point, one of them asked if taking 7% out of your retirement account every single year could ever be considered safe. The instant that number left his mouth, people in the comments section absolutely lost their minds. And honestly, I completely understand why people react so strongly, because the idea of how much money you can safely spend in retirement is one of the most stressful and deeply personal parts of planning your future. We all have this deep fear of running out of money after a lifetime of hard work. On one hand, you do not want to spend so aggressively that you find yourself struggling later in life. But on the other hand, you do not want to restrict your life so severely that you never actually enjoy the retirement you earned. Both of those outcomes feel like a quiet heartbreak. We hear so much about the traditional 4% rule, which has been taught as absolute gospel for decades. But when you look back at the actual history of that rule, it was never meant to be a rigid law for every single person. It was created to answer one extreme question: what is the single highest amount you could take out that would survive the absolute worst economic storm in modern history? It was built to protect someone who retired at the worst possible moment, like the early 70s when the market crashed and inflation went through the roof. That person took the exact same inflation-adjusted amount every year without ever changing their habits or trimming their sails. The rule was a safety net for the worst-case scenario, not a description of what usually happens. The creator of that research himself later shared that the vast majority of retirees could have safely spent much more. In fact, in almost 99% of historical periods, a typical retirement could easily support a withdrawal rate closer to 6 or 7%. Especially if you had the beautiful luck of retiring right before a great market expansion. So when we look at the numbers, we see a wide spectrum rather than a single frozen rule. We have the very cautious 4% at one end to survive a historic storm, a comfortable 6 or 7% in the middle for more typical times, and even higher amounts during strong periods. The market season you happen to retire into matters a lot. But since none of us can choose the exact economic weather on the day we stop working, the real secret is building a flexible strategy instead of blindly following a math equation. You can start by looking at your own life and choosing a soft range that fits your personality. If you are someone who naturally carries a lot of worry and wants absolute certainty, maybe your starting point sits in a quiet space between 3 and 4%. If you feel balanced and flexible, maybe you look at 4 to 5%. And if you are willing to make small adjustments as you go, you might start a bit higher. The moment you embrace a range, you take away that rigid pressure of chasing one perfect number. From there, you can adjust your personal plan based on 5 beautiful pieces of everyday logic. First, think about your time horizon, because a longer retirement naturally calls for a gentler start, while a shorter timeline gives you permission to lift that number a bit higher. Second, try to focus on building a warm financial floor, which means having some income that does not depend entirely on the stock market, like Social Security or a small pension. If your basic living needs are covered by those steady streams, then your investment portfolio only has to look after your fun adventures and extra comforts. That places you in a golden position, because if the market has a rainy year, you can easily choose to skip a big vacation without hurting your everyday peace of mind. Third, give yourself the gift of spending flexibility, because small changes in your daily habits can completely transform your financial safety if you are willing to tighten your belt just a little bit. When the horizon looks cloudy, you can safely start with a higher percentage. Fourth, protect yourself from early market storms by keeping a quiet cushion of cash for a few years of expenses so you never have to sell your investments at a lower price when the market dips. And fifth, look at the world around you when you begin your retirement. If everything in the market feels incredibly expensive and overvalued, it makes beautiful sense to lean into a more conservative space, while a quiet market environment might give you room to be a bit more generous with yourself. The real truth is that no real human being goes through 30 years of retirement, blindly taking out the exact same rigid percentage without ever looking at the world. We naturally adapt, we naturally care for our surroundings, and we naturally tighten our spending when things look lean. So instead of a frozen rule, you can create a gentle system of guardrails. You might start at a comfortable 5%, and if your basket grows, you can bless yourself with a little extra joy. But if the portfolio experiences a dip, you simply pause your annual increases or gently reduce your extra spending for a season. These tiny, mindful choices dramatically lift your chances of success while letting you live a life that feels authentic and free. Retirement is not a rigid math problem to be solved. It is a living, breathing chapter of your story that requires flexibility and grace. You do not have to bind yourself to a cold number on a spreadsheet. The people who truly thrive are those who maintain a gentle heart and a flexible mind along the way. When you look at your wealth through this lens, the frantic voices of the financial media lose their power over you. You realize that true financial freedom is not about accumulating a massive mountain of cash just to stare at it. It is about the quiet mornings it gives you, the long walks with the people you love, and the deep comfort of knowing that you are completely safe. It is an act of gentle self-care, a way of looking after the future version of you who deserves to rest and look back on life with a smile. You do not need to have everything perfectly figured out by tomorrow afternoon. You do not need to become a high-powered analyst. You just need to take one small mindful step at a time. Maybe that means simply opening your accounts this weekend and looking at your savings with a sense of curious wonder instead of anxiety. See where your money is resting, and remind yourself that you are doing the absolute best you can with the steps before you. We are all just walking each other home, trying to find our footing in a world that can sometimes feel a bit too fast and loud. But when we stick close together, when we share our stories and talk about these things openly without any fear or judgment, the path becomes beautiful and clear. So as the evening winds down and the world slows down around us, I want to thank you so much for spending this quiet time with me. It is always such a deep joy to step away from the rush of the day and just have a real grounded conversation about the things that truly touch our souls. If this little chat brought a bit of comfort to your evening, or if it helped you see your retirement journey in a slightly softer light, please feel free to share your thoughts with me down below. I always love reading your messages and hearing how you are doing on your own quiet path. Take care of your beautiful self, breathe deeply, and remember that you are doing wonderfully.